one interesting item called automation. How DevOps resources do automation is something we'll look at. Okay. I'll explain the theory. I'll give the hands-on activity for you to practice. It's not graded, but it will help you just to learn by trying your hands dirty. Okay. Because I can't cover the hands-on also in 1 hour. I'll create one good document and share it with you. I've uploaded all the notes so far in Gitbook. There's also one small homework which I've given. It's available in the website. You can just write 2 pages, but the idea is read about it, understand, and then submit it. Okay, I've also shared GitHub Classroom link for that. You can find the homework in the Gitbook. Okay, so coming back to automation, um, imagine you are in the organization, joined as a new engineer, which is your first job. Okay, and you undergo something called onboarding process, where you will be given an ID card, you will be given a seat, right? Apart from that, there are certain things which happen in the back end that typically taken care by DevOps. Okay, what are they? There are three stages where a typical engineering activities or developer activities span for a new engineer who is joining a new organization, and that's where automation plays a role. So I'm taking a new engineer as an example so that you will understand easily. Okay, what are those stages? Pre-development, during development.
Sir, I think you have not shared your screen.
Oh, is it? I'm sorry. Okay, wait, where is this? Thanks for reminding me. Okay, is my screen visible?
Yes, sir, visible.
Oh, sorry for that. Okay, so in this session, we will look at automation by DevOps. So what I was trying to say is, imagine you are from a particular, you join an organization as new developer, and typically what happens is you will be given a ID card, you will given a seat. That's typically part of your onboarding process. But in the backend, the DevOps team performs certain tasks for you. 5 6 years ago, that was manual. Now it is totally automated. But where those automation activities play into practice, those automations play into practice in these three steps. One is pre-development, during development, and post development. Okay, what happens in the pre-development? Let's look at that example. So you are a new developer, took training for 3 months in that company, and you were given a task to change a logo on a web page. Okay, so what you'll do, you will go to that respective HTML page. I'm giving very simple example for you to understand. I don't want to complicate, so that's why you listen very simple example. So you were given a task to change a logo in HTML page, and that's a PNG image. Okay, as a developer on your machine, you will get this HTML page from the repository, which is remote repository, right? So you will know the git location of that page. You will do the pull into your local repository and then into your machine. You open the .html file, go to that line number, change the logo, add the new PNG file, and then push it back to the remote repository, right? So in pre-development phase, what happens to the new guy is the DevOps team will configure a development environment. Okay. whatever changes you are doing, pulling the code from remote repo, getting into your local machine, performing the changes, and pushing them back into the remote repository, all these things doesn't happen like you do in your local laptop. Okay, they happen in closed environments. Those environments are typically called as your developer environments. Okay, so if a team contains a team manager, a team lead, and imagine you have four developers, okay? Every person will get one dev environment. The underlying DevOps team will configure an image of an operating system, all the tools required for you to perform development, all accesses to the third party tools, terminals, repositories, your role permissions, all these things are curated in one OS machine image. Okay, how do they do that? We'll go in we'll look at in upcoming slides. But assume that these images, whatever they're created by DevOps, they are created as soon as you get onboarded. Okay, as soon as you get an ID card, there will be a backend job which is written in some tools, which I will give you an example going forward in the upcoming slides. Assume that there is a tool which will trigger that job, create an environment image for you, and when some IT guy gives you a machine, when you open that machine, you actually live in that dev environment. Okay, there are certain rules which are defined in those dev environment. For example, you may not be able to access third party wi-fi. You might only be having access to the wi-fi is defined in your office or in any certain whitelisted. You may not be able to connect to another machine through Bluetooth, or like you can't create an hotspot, you can't share files. So all these rules are typically defined by DevOps team, so that they restrict the dev environment for people who perform the development. All these things come under pre-development. Okay, typically in pre-development. So this is typical process of pre-development. So during development, let's assume you are you have changed the logo, and you have that logo in your local directory, in your C drive or some folder. Okay, now during development, the team lead will not allow you to directly push the code into remote repository, which is your production repository, right? So they will perform a code review. Okay, in typical code review, you will have guidelines on how to write code. They'll check that. They'll check whether whatever change you are requested is that performed correctly or not. They'll check that. They'll verify the unit test cases, whether the basic testing, whether the applied change is working fine or not. While they perform this code review, they don't take a copy of your local directory into their dev machine to do that. They will remotely gain access to your dev environment, perform those changes, and then pass the code review. Okay, there are code review tools as well which will help you do this activity in automated way, but assume that the team lead is doing this activity. Okay, so this is typically during development. If the code review fails, you are asked to perform the same changes in the same dev environment, and then you undergo again a round of code review. Upon success, you will submit a request to push the changes to remote repository. The respective team leader will approve that request, so that in tools like Gerrit or Bitbucket or GitHub, your logo changes of the HTML file will be pushed into the main repository. Okay, now one key thing which you need to understand over here is, as a developer, your environment is typically closed. Okay, Also, it is shared with only designated resources. So there are two items which play key here. One is identity management and infrastructure management. Okay. What is an identity management? What is infrastructure management? If you recall from the previous slide, as the DevOps resource creates all the required activities in the onboarding process, when he creates a dev environment to you, whatever tools, okay, I'll give the tool variant. Okay, one second, where's my mouse? So there is a tool called, where's this mouse? Okay, here it is. Ah, sorry. Vagrant. Remember these two. Vagrant. Okay. It is an open source tool which is typically used to create virtual environments. There are other tools called VMware, Centrix, VirtualBox. Okay. VirtualBox, I think you can install VirtualBox in your machine and partition your operating system into multiple pieces. Okay. Um, I think there is a one more open source called KVM. Forgot the extension. Okay. So typically tools like this, when the dev environment is created, they'll create an identity profile for you. Okay. So in this identity profile, there are set of privileges which are granted to you. Can you pull any repository available in the organization? Yes or no? Can you merge the code reviewed by others? Do you have the rights to push into the main repository or no? Can you perform uh, appending changes, update changes on the source code written by any other person from another team, etc.? Those properties are typically defined and an identity will be created to you. These identities are typically defined in the form of roles, role 1, role 2, where role 1 can be early developer, experienced developer, managers only. These are typical roles, okay, which they create. So if a new engineer joins a company, they will give early developer role, which will not have all permissions in identity management. They may only able to pull repos, perform changes, keep it in local environment, and live with it. If you're an experienced, they might give you merge access. If you're a manager, then you'll have full rights. So those things are usually taken care by identity management. So these are basic features available in tools like Vagrant, VMware, VirtualBox, where you can manage your developers automatically. So when the engineer gets on board, the DevOps resource will assign a dev environment, a identity to that resource, so that whatever task he does, whichever team he roams, he will live with certain developer environment settings and certain identity properties so that he can perform his day-to-day tasks. Okay. The second item which I was talking about is infrastructure management. Okay. Infrastructure management typically pans out with your dev environment where default developer templates or your dev environment will have some 1 GB of RAM or 250 GB of hard disk, like typical ROM. Okay. Imagine you will become responsible for generating builds or merging the builds, looking at code reviews, then you may not live with such a small amount of developer resources. So tools like Vagrant, VMware, Centrix, VirtualBox, KVM, or cloud tools like AWS or Google Cloud, they give you an auto scaling option. Okay. The auto scale typically helps you manage your resources on your machine dynamically. Okay. So there are typically static scaling, and dynamic scaling. When it comes to static scaling, it will only scale with certain X amount of resources. Like, for example, you are 1 GB and you can only grow till 2 GB. That X is fixed. You can't extend more than that. They typically give these properties for early roles or people who do admin task in development team. Dynamic scaling is they you can grow the environment by 2 power x or x square, so that if you're 1 GB and if you want to typically push to larger spaces, then your infra will automatically scale as you perform your development task. Good example for this scaling is for data engineers. So what data engineers typically do is they write DAX, which is nothing but ETL jobs. There's a tool called Airflow where you can read data from source and push data to destination using a directed graph, where it can tell you how much data. If I'm reading 10 million data, can I split the 5 million here, 5 million here, and then do the merge in the destination? So when they are required to perform operations on large data set, their developer machine should have auto scaling. If they don't have auto scaling, they may not be able to develop the DAC. Okay, because in production environment, the environment which is live for customers will have a different infrastructure setting. But when compared to a developer, you can't mimic that setting all the time. That's why, when you develop certain activities like this, like DAC in case of data engineers, your environment can auto scale like a production environment. And once your activity is done, it can be brought down to normal. Okay. That is how people who build large data pipelines or web pipelines mimic the developer environments at a production scale, just to perform unit testing, evaluate whether everything is as per the flow or not, and then push the changes. As soon as they are done with their activity, the environment will auto scale down. Okay, so that is how typically these activities are performed. Okay, the third part is with post deployment. Okay, post deployment. So when someone is trying to, like, when someone is ready with the code and the code is merged into the remote repository, okay, then your changes, whatever changes you are done, has gone to production. Imagine there is a bug found. Okay, your bug, let's assume it's part of your HTML file and your logo PNG. Let's assume the bug is file is corrupted or the file is not in a readable form. An automated bug can be created directly to you in the version control system, like Bitbucket, Gerrit, or GitHub, and get it assigned to you. Okay, because sorry, get it assigned to you with an environment where the bug can be reproducible. Okay, I'll repeat again. Imagine during post development, you finish the code writing, you merge the code by help of your development lead. The code is now in report repository. The QA team picked up the code, created the build, deployed the product in production, and there was a bug found. Let's assume the production, the bug reports can be directly created and assigned to you. While they create one environment by deploying that piece of code which has bug, where you can reproduce that problem. The developer will come to this operating system image or this template, okay, to do the development, perform changes, and then push the changes to remote repository from this environment. Okay, so what he does is, in his machine, he has his own developer environment. Inside his developer environment, he'll open the environment where the bug can be reproducible, fixes the bug, pushes that changes to remote repository, and then that bug can be pushed into production. Okay, so these are the post development activities which typically run by the developer. So to give a small recap, typical automation activities which DevOps team does is to provide environments with identity and infrastructure scaling as you join an organization. Those environments are typically used during pre-development, during development, and post-development. In case of pre-development, you get an operating system template with predefined tools that you can use. You open the code editor, you can get the download of your code from your own GitHub, your own code repo into your local machine. You perform the changes, push the code during code review, and then move it to production. If the bugs are found, a bug related OS image template where the issue can be reproduced will be assigned to you. You can enter into that environment from your own development environment, fix that bug, push it to remote repo, and then push it to prod. So these are at a very high level common development activities which you can perform as a DevOps engineer. Okay, so we'll look at some tools. Okay, there are very good tools in the market which are open source. One is Ansible. Okay, which is a tool for creating multiple host machines. Okay, imagine you have one host which has Linux operating system. One, for example, it has 1 TB of hard disk. You can break this machine into multiple development environment clients and assign these templates to respective developers to perform the development. Okay, I can show you, I can give you excuse me. Yeah, so you can go to Ansible, um, at ansible.com. So it's typically from Red Hat, I guess. Yeah, so this is fairly a simple tool. Documentation is pretty good. You need to have some level of hard disk. Like for example, if you have 1 TB of hard disk, you can download Ansible. Ansible typically has one control node, which is your own machine. Okay, let me share this. Yeah, and flash this at the same time. One second. Yeah. Huh. So Ansible has an ability to create multiple nodes which are nothing but dev environment machines with a fixed host. It will help you to break down or predefine certain pieces of source code available for people to use. There is something called playbook, which I'll speak about it. But why these tools like Ansible are typically useful? For example, today you are using, for example, the CTO of the company wants you to use an IDE called IntelliJ. Okay, right? Now, one way to ask all developers is send an email, tell them, hey, please install these IDE, stop using Vim or PyCharm, whatever tools you're using, or VS Code, whatever tools you're using, stop using that. Start using IntelliJ, let's assume. Okay. Now imagine if he just sends an email, maybe one person might install, the other may not look at it even. So The CTO can take an help of a DevOps resource, okay, to install that IntelliJ on this host and push the changes to all these images or managed nodes, okay, so that you can enforce a fixed environment to all the developers to perform controlled development, okay. This may not be serious in all software providers or software manufacturers, but people who build secure software products, okay. For example, UPI is very secure product which requires a serious closed development environment, right? All banking applications, all stockbroking apps, whoever build these backend or front end stockbroking apps need to follow certain fixed internal guidelines while building the system, okay. So that is why you can't just use whatever tools you need in case of a particular operating system or a particular type of a system. You can only use certain tools guided by the underlying leadership, and that will be typically managed and taken care by people like DevOps, like tools like Ansible, okay. One good thing with Ansible is you have an ability to create what we called playbooks, okay. Playbook is actually a place where you can define list of tasks that one has to perform, what task it is, okay, what module of that task do you want a respective developer to perform, okay. Let's assume you are a developer. The CTO wants you to do three things on daily basis. One, log your time, okay. To write unit test cases of your code without miss. For example, you do one line change, two line change, you have to write unit test cases. Do you know what is unit test cases? Can someone tell me what are unit test cases? Yes, no?
We test for some basic functionality of whole product.
Correct. So, for example, if I change the logo, assume that I have image tag href, some path, logo.png, okay, then I have closed the image. So what developer typically has to do is to write a test case which will tell that if the emg has x.png, it should print success, else file not found, okay. They'll typically write this test cases like a simple scripts. There are tools to write test cases like qa hub, test runner, test toast, uh, ant tests. There are many testing which are open source where a developer can go and write simple unit test cases, okay. Unit test cases are test cases to just check whether the changes performed by the developer is running into success or a failure, okay. So in case of such test cases, coming back to this example, if your CTO wants you to perform three tasks in a given day, log your dev time, write your test cases, unit test cases, and write code. So you can define a playbook in Ansible where you can define those tasks, list of tasks, what tasks they are, which part of the folder directory that tasks need to be performed, and he can do a he can do the tracking of those tasks. If there is no log time performed on certain file or certain document, the CTO will get an idea that he out of 100 developers, 6 didn't submit log time to it. So you can write an alert for them to send an email or do an SMS or do a Slack notice, Slack update that hey, finish the log date time. If there are any code changes observed in Git or Gerrit or Bitbucket, which you have merged into your local repository, in Ansible, you can write a task to check whether you have submitted its corresponding test cases in the test suite tool. So that type of automation one can do at a leadership level to run the entire operations. So these things are typically taken care by DevOps teams. Okay. So this is something called about Ansible. There are many other tools like Ansible, as I said. Mostly these tools are paid, but Ansible is free, and typically they use a virtualizer, which is also free, called Vagrant. Okay, I'll show you that too. So this is Vagrant's website. It's a German company. So they will help you build virtual machines for development environments. So you can see, you can go to the use cases, provision development environments. You can define some tasks, some virtual boxes. You can specify which tools you want. As I told about IntelliJ example, if the developer, if the CTO wants a certain tool to be present in all the machines, you can run through these tools like Vagrants. Okay, so this is a pretty open source tool. Anybody can use. If you're running a company, you typically need a Vagrant setup so that you can clone your operating system and create small development environments to your people, your developers. Okay, any questions so far? So give you a recap. Typical automation: pre, post, pre, during, and post. Tools like Ansible, Vagrant will help you break your OS and create development environments for secure products, pushing the tasks through playbooks with an example of unit test case which we have seen so far. Any questions so far?
No, sir.
Okay. So let's look at what we called yeah, robotic process automation, RPA. Okay. So RPA is a very high level jargon for you to understand what I say in terms of automating the development tasks in general. Like, for example, all human tasks that are repetitive, um, reusable, that are typically available to perform, you can automate them by writing standard scripts. Okay, I'll give one example. Imagine, let's look at the logo example. Okay, imagine you are trying to change logo in HTML file. Okay, there is a rule. Typically the dev organizations define rules like this. So if you perform your change of this logo, the file of the change should be named as underscore stage dot html. Let's assume the file name is welcome.html. So if you want to send this to code review, the file should be welcome underscore stage.html. Okay, this should be the standard. Assume that the new developer who is working on it forgot this. It's common for them to forget, right? Or because he doesn't have much practice, he may eventually forget to follow the guidelines set up by that organization. So this is a manual task, and if he performs changes 10 times, he might forget in which version this fellow is making that change. So you can use fixed scripts using bash to define the naming convention of such files. How can you do that? Imagine in your working directory, you have this file HTML, okay? And to move this file after your development, you are asked to move to a stage folder, okay? How do? You do .cd, go to that stage folder, mv, you move this HTML file using mv command, move, and then move that file to that stage folder. Imagine you forget renaming the file as welcome underscore stage.html. You can write a bash script where it can sense the file which is moved to stage folder, and you can do rename. What's the command for rename in bash? Do you remember? Do you know? Are you guys there, or okay, you are here?
So I think it is rename only.
Yeah, I think it's rename. So you can write a small sensing script where you can do rename file name. So what happens, even if you send a file name as welcome.html, the underlying rename script will sense whether the file is reaching the stage folder or not. Once it reaches there, it will append the file using rename dot file name. Rename from welcome.html to welcome underscore stage.html. So such process activities, which are typically human tasks, can be automated using the RPA. Okay. Can you think of any other RPA tasks which a typical developer need forgets and can be automated? Any thoughts?
Sir, can you repeat your question?
Huh. Can you think about any human tasks where you can automate through Bash or any other scripting language which are human task in nature?
Sir, like in this DevOps.
In general, any developer tasks, my question is, provide any developer tasks where you can automate using simple scripts.
Sir, so if we suppose if we want to search for a file with a given extension,
Hmm.
then in that case
Good.
we can just simply write a script to search all the
Nice.
files.
Very good. So imagine you are a developer, you only have access to a terminal. You were told that there is a folder where it contains sample dataset files to do demo testing. Okay, let's assume there is a .md file where it has some sample text. You have written one feature in your .js file, and you need this file as an input. Okay, now the point is you only know that there is this file exists in some remote repository, but you don't know how to search. What you do is you can write a pre-curated batch script which can do grep of entire remote repo. All you need to do is send that remote repo path and file name, and it returns you potential sample files. Now this is one task where you don't need to manually go or perform grep, perform, write your custom grep command. Some DevOps resource can automate this task for you and give you some command. Like for example, you can write custom commands. By the way, in Bash, there is a file called ampersand dot bash rc file. Okay, you can define a command and give a name to it. So for example, I can give Sai as a name to some command and add that command in bash rc file, so that a developer when types Sai, the underlying code for that command will get executed. So typically that's how DevOps team create new commands. Okay, so that's a very good example. Searching files in remote repo for particular tasks, right? Where you can have RPA. Typically entire RPA works on bash scripts so that you can automate as much as you possible. Another good example is typical data entry. So as a developer, when you write your own code, you will need to supply input for your code to 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 perform not unit test in general, but to verify the data flow and control flow of your code. For example, let's assume you are writing a program. I'm taking a very simple example. Let's assume you are writing a program to do a calculation. Okay, you are taking an input of a and b, and you are just doing a sum. In some function you are doing x is equal to a plus b, and you are printing x. Okay, imagine this is the code you are trying to write. It's a very very simple example, but I'm trying to give you so that you'll understand. As a developer, you want to know whether the flow of the data is working as per the expected, whether the control flow of the data is also as per the expected. Because if you're a developer, you have to also check whether you have any dead code. Dead code is called code offline, which is not getting executed. You have to be very careful about that. You need to check if there is any golden hammer problem. Golden hammer is there is a huge code block which is doing nothing. That's waste of having that code block, right? So for example, you know that you are doing sum, but there is another function called subtract which is not even being called anywhere. That's a golden hammer problem. So you are writing a code to check all these things. You also check for data flow and control flow, just to see whether it's possible for you to verify the data. So instead manually equating the value like int equal to 2, b equal to 6, and calling the sum function, okay, all the developers will write a standard data entry logic. Okay, this is also they'll write to bash. Okay, what they do is what my boss taught me when I joined in the first part of my company was there is one script which will read how many inputs are there to your program, what are the data types, and it will automatically push the data using random method. Okay, so there is an inbuilt method called random. If you know Python, you will have to import random. It's a inbuilt library. Okay, if you are using bash, there is rand function which will return random value in numbers or alphanumeric or alphabets. So you can write a bash script to read inputs. How do you read inputs? You have to pass your source code. So if your source code is .py, let's assume it's a Python file, you have to send that input to your batch script. That my script is py file, like sum.py. It will scan and check for inputs. How it will check? It will do the static code analysis. It will do static code analysis. It will check what are the variables that are declared, what are the data types. That it will read using static code analysis, and it will randomly equate values to your code. Okay, equate values to your input. And when you call that method, you don't need to explicitly do the data flow and control flow. The If the code runs into error, then the control flow is wrong. In the stack trace you can see which line number, which column number you have the error. If that runs into success, then your data flow and control flow is correct. Okay, so this is very simple example, but in general, if I have to give a real world example how people use these type of data entry is, imagine you have a registration form, right? In registration form, oh sorry, huh. So imagine you have a registration form, okay, and you have some 15 fields, radio button, checkbox, etc., and then submit, save, and exit, abort. Okay, let's assume you have all these options in your registration form. To verify if the data flow is working fine, you need to always check whenever you push the input value here and then click on submit. You need to check that value is getting posted into that respective table or not. Okay, that's a typical data flow people check. Now you can't spend 1 hour on a registration form just to type values and then verify the data is being pushed into DB or not, right? Instead, what they'll do is they'll use inbuilt data entry scripts where whatever HTML code you have or whatever underlying JS code you have, you supply it as input. There it will check the type of the file, number of input variables, and its data type, and it will manufacture you the input and pushes it to your page, so that you don't need to spend more time on data flow and control flow. You can actually spend more time on the logic. Okay, so these are typical tasks where remote process automation helps you do. There are many processes like creating dummy data in the database for a product. Like, imagine the same registration form. If in the back end you have a page to see how many people registered, you can populate that data manually, right? So you can write some automation scripts to select, create data artificially and pump into the DB using RPA type of tools. Any questions so far?
No, sir.
Okay. So in practice, there are tools, different tools for RPA in case of different use cases. Okay. So if you're using UI, if you're trying to build UI, there is a nice tool called UI Path where it will help you create UI screens, UI test cases, etc. If you want to create any CV, computer vision related automation, there's a good tool called Automation Everywhere. All these are paid tools. Okay, I don't think we can access them on demand. Automation Everywhere. Maybe you guys know what we call Pega. I think there's a company called Pega Systems, which is also an automation RPA kind of a tool. There's another company called Kofax. This is an automation tool for all these forms. Whatever web forms you create, documentation, any form in any website, if you want to automate form creation, form data flow, control flow testing, you can use this Kofax tool for evaluation. There is a tool by IBM Watson which is called RPA, which will help you automate tasks using a drag and drop interface. Okay, so I think I'll share URLs of all these tools, some short videos of these tools, okay, where you can see how that automation works, what type of tasks people perform through these tools. Okay, the last thing we learned today as part of automation is Postman. Okay. Does you all know what is API?
Yes, sir.
Anyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good, good, good. So, do you guys know Postman?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay, that is good. I'll just give a 1 minute brief of Postman so that I'll try to cover RPA in short. Okay. So, application program interface is actually a layer on top of your business logic so that you can perform certain CURD operations on top of your business logic and get the data on demand. Okay, this is called application program interface. Like for example, you have a form, okay, where you are required to populate 10 fields and click on submit button. If you are accessing this form and try to fill the form, imagine it might take 1 minute to fill the form. Okay, but if you are required to fill this form for 100 people, you need 100 minutes, right? So which is time intensive to make. What people have done program interface where they expose this underlying logic of form on a layer for you to consume through REST calls. Okay, are you all aware of REST? I think you should know REST. Do you know REST?
Yes, sir.
Yes, no, can't say. Yes, no.
Sir, somewhat I know.
Okay, okay, okay. So REST, REST, is a technology which is created on top of APIs to read data in a stateless form. Okay, what is a state? Imagine you are accessing your NIT Tiruchirappalli. Do you have any in-house tool? Okay, let's not use NIT Tiruchirappalli. Let's use Aadhaar website. Okay, let's go to Aadhaar website. Huh. So now if I go to Aadhaar website, let's go to English. I will have an option to log in. Yes or no? When I log in, there will be a session created to my login. When a session is created to my login, I think Aadhaar is a bad idea. Let me go. I can't go to my bank account. I can go to LinkedIn. I think this is a good example. Okay. Imagine I'm accessing LinkedIn. Okay. When I'll access LinkedIn, a session for me will be created. There will be a session token, authentication token. That token typically helps me to perform whatever tasks I do in LinkedIn. But when I log out, that session and the authentication of that session will be lost. Okay, so what's actually happening is there is a state for Sai and Irut being created while I access the LinkedIn website. When I click on network, when I click on jobs, when I click on notification, my state is being transferred with the actions I perform in the given session. Okay. So when I do jobs within the same session, within the same state, I'm hopping from one page to another page. Okay. But imagine you don't need to access LinkedIn, you don't need to authenticate, you don't need to maintain a session. But if you still want to access the jobs page, you can do that using REST. Okay, REST is a stateless communication system where you don't need to actually enter and create a session and state for your persona in that website or in that app. You can directly call the desired method or desired object. Imagine jobs is one object. I have to call the job object directly without logging in, without creating a session, without creating a state, and get whatever I want. That is called REST. Okay. Now REST has certain methods. They do those are post, get, set, patch. Okay. I'll give you a very nice example using a dummy website which I usually use for everyone when I teach REST. So there is a, oh God, what is this? So imagine there is a website called, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, sir, we can see.
Do you see recres.in?
Yes.
Okay, good. Do you see Postman anywhere? Let me share Postman also. Do you see Postman? Do you see a
Yeah.
browser? Ah,
Yes.
what you see on my screen is Postman. Okay. What I'm trying to do here is there is a website which has certain methods. Okay. What are those methods? Get method, post method, put method, patch, delete. Okay. If I do get users, I'm getting some bunch of users. Okay. Now let me show my LinkedIn page in parallel. Do you see my LinkedIn page?
Yes, sir.
When I click on my network, one second. When I click on my network, the page got refreshed, yes or no? I start seeing these people. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Imagine the action I performed is equal to list users over here, okay? Which is actually returning the data of all the people in JSON, okay? What happens in the backend of list connections will happen through API by list users, but the raw data in the UI is typically seen by adding some CSS images, some form settings, and that's why instead seeing in JSS you will see it in a typical page which is tiled in certain format, in a fixed UI format. But in the backend you see them like this, like typical JSON. Okay. So Postman is a tool which will help you to read that data from the website in a stateless fashion using REST. Okay. So I'll pick this API like get single user. Okay. So here it is. I'll use the method AP REST AP REST request.in slash API. This is an API. Users is the method. Two, when I click on send, it will return two users. Okay. One fellow name is recres.in. Yeah, it will return one user. Okay. ID user with ID 2. If I check if there is user ID 29. Okay, there's no 29. Let's check if there's a user with 3. Yeah, there is a user with 3. So I'm passing an ID value as a parameter in the URL to read the data. Similarly, in case of LinkedIn, when I click on list connection, there can be some underlying API which passes a parameter like this to show the connections I have. Imagine I have how many connections I have. So I have 3,318 connections. When I click on this 318 connections are actually coming like this through an API. There could be my email ID being passed and the values being listed over here. So a application programming interface through REST help you read data from your business logic. Okay. Now how this will help the RPA? I think we ran out of time. We'll actually look at it in our next class. I'll give you some examples on how REST can help you in performing the RPA tasks, like reading some source code which is common across all repositories. How can you do that using RPA? That will look at as an example in next class. Okay. So I'll give you a small reading activity. I'll give you 5 tools to just go through and read their websites, try to understand. I'll give you some videos in YouTube. You just have a look at them and try to understand what those tools are, just like an hands-on. In one of the assignment two, what we'll do, we'll set up Ansible. We will create some 2 to 3 nodes and try to play around Ansible so that you'll understand how Ansible looks like. Okay. Great. That's all I have for today. Do you have any questions?
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir. चलेगा चलेगा